20 black bands from the 1970s that vanished without a trace. The 1970s, a decade of bell-bottoms, afros, and some of the most groundbreaking music ever made. But what happened to the bands that defined the sound of that era? We're diving deep into the world of 70s black bands, from the soulful to the funky, uncovering the stories of 20 incredible groups that seemed to vanish without a trace. Get ready to rediscover the music and the mystery. Let's hit it. Labelle. They started out as Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells with Nona Hendryx, Sarah Dash, and Patti LaBelle. But when they became Labelle, that's when they really turned into something truly special. We're talking about a sound that was just bursting with energy, mixing rock, funk, soul, and everything in between, right? And their live shows? Whew. They were like nothing else. All glitz, glam, outrageous costumes, and just a whole lot of fierce energy. Then came 1974, and Lady Marmalade hit. That song was a straight-up sensation. It took over the airwaves, the dance floors, everything. It was like a cultural earthquake, and it put Labelle on the map in a major way. Their album, Nightbirds, that's the album that brought the world that track, really solidified their place in music history. It was just this powerful explosion of sound that was completely original. But after all the highs, the ladies decided to go their separate ways after a tour in 1976. But you know, that wasn't the end of the story. Patti LaBelle became a superstar, right? A solo force to be reckoned with. Nona Hendryx went her own way, exploring some avant-garde sounds. And Sarah Dash, she was that sought-after session singer, and that's why they're so legendary, because even when they were on their own, they continued to shine. The JBs. All right, let's kick things off with a band that's pure fire, the JBs. Picture this. It's 1970, and James Brown, the godfather of soul, needs a new backing band after his old crew split. He wasn't just going to grab anybody. He assembled a powerhouse, and that's how the JBs were born. Man, this group was stacked with talent. We're talking about Bootsy Collins, laying down those ridiculously funky bass lines. The guy was a prodigy. And Fred Wesley, that trombone player, he could make that horn talk? These cats weren't just playing notes. They were building a whole new kind of groove. They were the backbone of some of James Brown's biggest hits. Pass the Peas, Doing It to Death. You know, the ones that get your feet moving. But the JBs weren't just background players. No way. They stepped into the spotlight themselves and released some absolute jams of their own. They were known for their raw energy, their tight rhythms, and the way they made every performance feel like a party. But you know, all good things. As James Brown's star started to fade a bit in the late 70s and early 80s, the JB's time in the spotlight also started to dim. By the mid-80s, they'd pretty much called it quits. But the music didn't stop for those guys. Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker, they're legends. They didn't just disappear. They kept on playing, kept on collaborating, and kept on shaping the sound of funk for years to come. The Chi-Lites. Hailing from Chicago, the Chi-Lites stepped onto the scene way back in 1959 with Eugene Record, Robert Lester, Creedell, Red Jones, and Marshall Thompson as the founding members. From the jump, they were all about those beautiful harmonies, those heartfelt ballads. When they dropped tracks like Have You Seen Her and Oh Girl in the early 70s, man, those songs became the soundtrack to so many lives. Just pure gold, right? They weren't just singing. They were telling stories, sharing their feelings, making everyone feel what they felt. Now, like a lot of groups, they had their ups and downs. Members came and went over the years. Eugene Record, the lead man, the guy who wrote so many of their hits, he left the group in the late 70s, although he did come back for a short run in the 80s. Even though the group kept performing with new faces, the original lineup, that magic combination, never got back together. Marshall Thompson, though? He was the constant. He kept the Chi-Lites' legacy alive for decades. He was the heart and soul of the group. He kept that music going until his passing in 2016. And that's why even today, the Chi-Lites' songs are timeless. The Dramatics. They came together back in 1964 with Ron Banks, Larry Demps, Elbert Wilkins, Willie Ford, and William Weegee Howard. Right from the start, they had that smooth sound, but they also had this raw energy, a real feeling that was just undeniably cool. They were known for those tight, soaring harmonies, and they had a way of making you feel every single word. When they dropped hits like In the Rain and What You See Is What You Get, man, they just resonated with folks. They weren't afraid to get real, to get deep, and people felt that connection. Now, the Dramatics, they weren't just a flash in the pan. They had a serious run in the 70s. They stacked up top 10 hits, earned gold record after gold record. They were really hitting it big time. They were just tearing up the charts. But like with any group that's been around for a while, the lineup changed over the years. Losing key members like Ron Banks and Willie Ford, well, that took a toll, and the original group eventually disbanded. The Stylistics. They formed back in 1968 with Russell Tompkins Jr., Herb Merle, Arian Love, James Smith, and James Dunn. Now listen, what made the Stylistics so special? It was Russell Tompkins Jr.'s voice, right? That falsetto? Unbelievable. It was like silk being spun into sound. And it wasn't just his voice. It was how those harmonies blended together, just pure magic. When they dropped songs like Betcha by Golly Wow and You Make Me Feel Brand New, they created pure magic, pure musical bliss. It was the sound of Philly soul at its absolute finest. They helped to really define the whole genre. But like many bands, the Stylistics faced their challenges. Things changed in the mid-70s when Tom Bell, who was basically the architect of their sound, stopped producing for them. It was a big shift, and it affected them. Their popularity started to fade a bit here in the States, even though they still were packing the houses across the pond in the UK. Over time, the lineup started to change. James Dunn and James Smith left the group in the early 80s. But let's be clear, nothing can ever take away their early hits. Those songs are timeless classics, just pure gold. They take you back to a different time and make you feel all those emotions, all those beautiful feelings. The Stylistics left an incredible mark with their harmonies and those unforgettable ballads, true legends of soul. Which of these group stories resonated with you the most, and what did it make you think about? The Delfonics. They came together back in 1965, led by brothers William and Wilbert Hart, with Randy Kane rounding out the original trio, and later, Major Harris joining the group. Now, the magic of the Delfonics came from their voices. Those smooth harmonies, those sweet melodies, they just pulled you in, right? They were all about those heartfelt lyrics, those songs about love and loss and everything in between. And when they dropped songs like Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time and La La Means I Love You, they created instant classics. They helped define the whole Philly soul vibe. And let's not forget Tom Bell. He was the producer behind their magic, the man who really shaped their sound with those beautiful, lush arrangements. The Delfonics were on top of the world in the late 60s and early 70s, with gold records and chart-topping hits. They were just riding high. But like with all good things, change came. Randy Kane left in 1971, and Tom Bell started working on other projects. Things started to shift, and their popularity started to wane a bit. Eventually, the members went their separate ways, trying their hand at solo careers. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Formed in '69 by the visionary Maurice White, along with his brother Verdine and a powerhouse group of musicians. They blended all kinds of sounds into something uniquely EWF. They weren't just about music, they were about spreading love, unity, and positivity. The 70s were their decade, dominating the charts with hits like September and Shining Star. Those songs became anthems. Their elaborate stage shows with costumes and choreography were part of the full EWF experience. Like many bands, change came. Maurice White had to stop performing in the 90s due to health issues and sadly passed in 2016. Other original members also passed on, but their legacy continues. Verdine White, Philip Bailey, and Ralph Johnson are still keeping the EWF spirit alive today. The Moments. They started back in 1965 with Al Goodman, Billy Brown, and Harry Ray, the trio that would become known for their incredible harmonies and that real, raw emotion they brought to every song. They hit their stride in the 70s with tunes like Love on a Two-Way Street and Sexy Mama, which became instant classics. The Moments had a way of making you feel like you were right there with them, sharing in those tender moments and those passionate feelings. They just captured the sound of love and longing. It was a real gift. But life, as they say, it throws curveballs. In 1978, they had some legal battles that forced them to change their name to Ray, Goodman, and Brown. And you know what? They kept the magic alive, right? They continued to drop hits like Special Lady and just kept the momentum going, showing that no matter what their name was, their talent remained the same. But things changed again. In 1982, Harry Ray decided to go solo. Now, he eventually came back before his passing in 1992, but that shift definitely had an impact on the group. Even though they kept the music going with some new members, they never quite recaptured the same mainstream attention as before. Al Goodman passed away in 2010, and Billy Brown had a stroke in 2016, and unfortunately, it marked the end of an era for this iconic R&B group. War came together in 1969, and they were a group of incredibly talented musicians, including Eric Burdon, Howard Scott, Lee Oscar, and Lonnie Jordan. And they weren't afraid to mash up funk, jazz, rock, soul, Latin rhythms, all of it. And that's how they created their very unique sound. They dropped Spill the Wine, which was a major hit early on. And then, of course, Lowrider. That song became an anthem, a certified classic, and it was just pure magic. And Why Can't We Be Friends? They were a musical force to be reckoned with, right? They were spreading good vibes and promoting unity in their music. But with success came challenges. War had its share of internal conflicts, and there were quite a few lineup changes over the years. Eric Burdon left early on, and by the late 70s, things got even more turbulent. There was drama, tensions, and more folks departing the group. And it didn't end there, sadly. They suffered some devastating losses with the tragic murder of saxophonist Charles Miller in 1980 and the passing of percussionist Papa D. Allen in 1988. It took a real toll on the group. By the 90s, the original group had really disbanded, with some members forming the Lowrider Band. Lonnie Jordan, he kept the name War alive, continuing to perform with new members. The main ingredient. They started their journey way back in 1964 with Donald McPherson, Luther Simmons Jr., and Tony Sylvester. Now, they were grinding for years trying to get a break. And then 1972 hit, and they dropped that classic, Everybody Plays the Fool. The whole world went nuts for that tune. It was one of those songs that just stuck with you, you know? It was that honest emotion, that raw delivery that really connected with so many. Tragically, Donald McPherson passed away in '71. But they kept going, with Cuba Gooding Sr. as their new lead singer. He was a perfect fit, They continued with hits like Just Don't Want to Be Lonely and Happiness is Just Around the Bend. The main ingredient were on top of the R&B world, but like most groups, they faced challenges. The music scene changed, there were some lineup shifts, and things weren't the same. Cuba Gooding Sr. went solo in '77, although he did come back for reunions. He sadly passed away in 2017, closing the chapter on this iconic group. Of all the bands we talked about, which one do you think had the biggest impact on music, and why? The Ike and Tina Turner Revue. The group started in 1960, and it was led by the complex and at times volatile duo of Ike Turner and his wife, the one and only Tina Turner. And listen, this was more than just a married couple performing together. This was a musical machine. You had Ike's band, the Kings of Rhythm, laying down those funky grooves. Then you had the Ikeettes, those incredible backing vocalists, adding that extra spark. But let's be clear, at the center of it all was Tina, with that voice that moves like liquid heat and that stage presence that was just magnetic. When they were at their best, they were unstoppable. They tore up the charts with classics like Proud Mary, River Deep, Mountain High, and Nutbush City Limits, which were staples on the dance floor and the airwaves. But behind all of the glitz and the glam, there was turmoil brewing. Their personal relationship and professional life were filled with problems, especially for Tina. She dealt with some serious abuse from Ike, and eventually it became too much. The professional relationship finally broke down in 1976, and it wasn't long after that they went their separate ways. The Spinners, formed way back in '54. The original lineup included Henry Fambrough, Billy Henderson, Purvis Jackson, Bobby Smith, and G.C. Cameron. They were all about smooth, catchy tunes from the start, but the '70s were their decade. Classics like I'll Be Around and Could It Be I'm Falling in Love were everywhere, the soundtrack to so many lives. The Spinners were R&B staples, creating songs that could move your feet and your heart. But change came. G.C. Cameron was replaced by Philip Wynne, who then went solo in '77. After that, the lineup shifted a lot. By the '80s, members began to leave or sadly passed away. Billy Henderson left in '04, Purvis Jackson in '08, and Bobby Smith passed in '13. But shout out to Henry Fambrough, who kept the music going into the 2020s. He kept their legacy alive. The Jackson 5. Let's rewind to Gary, Indiana, and the magic of the Jackson 5. 5 brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Little Michael, managed by their father, Joe. They were one of the first black groups to explode into the mainstream. These kids had crazy talent. They were energetic, infectious, and the world couldn't get enough. Hits like I Want You Back and ABC made them early '70s kings of pop and soul. But as the brothers grew, things shifted. In '75, they left Motown for Epic, becoming the Jacksons. Jermaine stayed behind, replaced by their younger brother Randy. They kept making music, but Michael's solo career took off. Off the Wall and Thriller propelled him to superstardom, and the original Jackson 5's spotlight faded. They left a legacy of iconic songs, incredible performances, and a reminder of the power of family. They're forever legends. Commodores. The Commodores formed back in 1968 at the Tuskegee Institute, and the original lineup was a powerhouse. Lionel Richie, Thomas McClary, William King, Ronald LaPred, Milan Williams, and Walter Orange. Right from the jump, they had this incredible energy, this ability to create music that was just irresistible. They hit their stride in the '70s, and they just took over the world. When they dropped bangers like Brick House, Easy, and 3 Times a Lady, they created a permanent spot in music history, right? Those songs were everywhere, on the radio, on the dance floor, just pure magic. Lionel Richie played a key role, of course. He was a musical force of nature. He had that incredible songwriting talent, and his voice, that was just smooth like butter. But the whole group, they were just so talented. They all brought something special to the table. But like with most bands, things change. In 1982, Lionel Richie decided to go solo, and with that decision, that was the end of the original lineup as we knew it. Thomas McClary left in 1983, and Ronald LaPred in 1986. The Commodores kept performing with new members, and they still made some great music, but it just wasn't the same. The magic of that original lineup was something that just couldn't be recreated. MFSB. Formed in '71, they were the house band for Philadelphia International Records. These musicians were the secret ingredient behind hits for the OJs, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the Spinners, and countless others. They created those smooth, lush, funky, soulful arrangements that made those songs unforgettable. Then came TSOP, The Sound of Philadelphia. This instrumental track was a game changer. It became the Soul Train theme song and topped the charts in '74. It was a disco anthem, capturing the energy of the era. It showed everyone their brilliance. But as disco faded in the late '70s, so did MFSB's influence. Internal issues and industry changes led to their disbanding in the early '90s. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Mandrill. Mandrill was formed back in 1968 by the Wilson brothers, Carlos, Lou, and Rick, and they were all about breaking down boundaries, about taking funk, jazz, Latin music, and just mashing it all together. And that's what created their signature sound. They weren't afraid to experiment, to push the limits, and that's what made them so exciting. When they dropped tracks like Fence Walk and Ape is High, it just showcased their incredible talent and their unique style. It was a sound that was all their own. You couldn't confuse them with anybody else. Mandrill had a whole squad of talented musicians, all bringing their skills and energy to the table. But as time went on, things started to change, and like a lot of groups, their popularity began to decline. There were shifts within the group, the music industry was evolving, and it just wasn't the same as before. By the mid-'80s, many of the original members left the group to pursue other opportunities. Royce. Royce came together in 1973 with the powerhouse vocals of Gwen Dickey, Henry Garner on drums, LeQuint Duke, Job on bass, Michael Moore on saxophone, Kenny Copeland on trumpet and vocals, Kenji Brown on guitar and vocals, Freddie Dunn on trumpet, and Victor Nix on keyboards. They were a big band with a big sound, and they were ready to take over the world. They were really starting to build up a buzz, but everything changed with Car Wash in 1976. That song was an absolute phenomenon. It hit #1 on the charts, and it became the theme song for the movie of the same name. That track was everywhere, and it defined an entire moment. Royce, they were on fire in the late '70s. They were pumping out hit after hit with songs like I Want to Get Next to You, Wishing on a Star, and Love Don't Live Here Anymore. They were blending that raw funk with smooth R&B, creating a sound that was just irresistible. But like so many things in the music business, things started to change in the early '80s. Musical tastes were shifting, and the group started having some internal issues. Lead singer Gwen Dickey left in 1980 to focus on her solo career, and that was a major shift for the band. The band's success started to decline, and they just couldn't recapture that same magic as before. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were a staple of the Philly soul scene, and they were just masters of creating those timeless sounds. The group consisted of Harold Melvin, Teddy Pendergrass, Bernard Wilson, Lawrence Brown, and Lloyd Parks. And let's be clear, Teddy Pendergrass's voice, that was something special. That power, that emotion, it was just undeniable, right? It was like velvet being poured over you. And that's what made their songs so powerful. They took over the charts in the 70s with classics like If You Don't Know Me By Now and The Love I Lost. Those songs were just dripping with emotion. You could feel the pain. You could feel the passion. It was the sound of real people singing about real things. But in 1976, things changed. Teddy Pendergrass decided to go solo, and that was a major shift for the band. They struggled to maintain the same level of success without him. They tried with new lead singers like David Ebo and later Gil Saunders, but they just never quite recaptured the magic of the original lineup. The Blackbyrds. They were formed in 1973 by trumpeter Donald Byrd and his students from Howard University. The original lineup was Kevin Toney on keyboards, Keith Kilgo on vocals and drums, Joe Hall on bass guitar, Alan Barnes on saxophone and clarinet, and Barney Perry on guitar. This was a group of seriously gifted musicians. They had a way of taking these different genres and blending them together into something that was incredibly unique. They were smooth, they were funky, and they just had a vibe that was just irresistible. And when they dropped those tracks like Walking in Rhythm and Rock Creek Park, they became staples on the radio and on the dance floor. They weren't afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of what people thought music could be. They were just creating music that felt good, that moved people, and that was real. The Blackbyrds were really influential because they attracted such a wide audience with their sound. It was something you could dance to, and also really dig into and listen to as well. But as the music scene changed and disco started to fade, it became tougher for the Blackbyrds. By the early 80s, a lot of the original members went their own ways. They wanted to focus on their solo careers or other projects. And that's where the group just broke up. The Emotions. Formed in '68 by sisters Wanda, Sheila, and Jeanette Hutchinson. They started in gospel, but transitioned to R&B and disco in the '70s, and that's when things exploded. They had magic, tight harmonies, infectious songs, pure joy. Their collaboration with Maurice White of Earth, Wind & Fire was key. Together, they made musical magic. Then in '77, they dropped Best of My Love. The whole world went wild. It hit #1 and won them a Grammy. The Emotions were a smash. But the music industry changed. There were issues with labels and tastes shifted, making it harder to stay on top. By '85, the original sisters stopped performing regularly. While they've reunited for special shows, the Emotions, as we know them, are no longer active. They left behind a legacy of soul, disco, and the power of sisterhood. 20 best forgotten groups of the 1970s that have fallen off the radar. The '70s rocked, but some bands, despite their talent and influence, didn't quite hit the mainstream. They were pioneers, innovators, and creators of unforgettable music that shaped the soundscape we know today. Joy Division. Formed in 1976, Joy Division quickly captured the attention of audiences with their unique and unsettling sound. Their music, a stark departure from the prevailing punk rock scene, explored themes of alienation, isolation, and existential angst, reflecting the bleak industrial backdrop of their hometown, Manchester, England. Curtis's baritone vocals, delivered with a chilling intensity, conveyed a sense of profound emotional depth, drawing listeners into their world of shadows and introspection. Their debut album, Unknown Pleasures, released in 1979, became a seminal work of the post-punk genre. Its stark black and white cover art, depicting radio waves from a pulsar, perfectly captured the album's brooding atmosphere and minimalist aesthetic. Tracks like She's Lost Control and Disorder showcased the band's innovative sound, blending angular guitar lines, propulsive bass lines, and Curtis's haunting vocals to create a sonic landscape that was both captivating and unsettling. Tragically, just as Joy Division's star was beginning to rise, their world was shattered. In 1980, on the eve of their first U.S. tour, Ian Curtis took his own life, succumbing to the demons that haunted him. His death sent shockwaves through the music world, leaving a void that could never be filled. Ironically, Curtis's death propelled Joy Division to a level of fame they might never have achieved in his lifetime. Their final album, Closer, released posthumously, became a critical and commercial success, cementing their place as one of the most influential bands of their era. Tracks like Love Will Tear Us Apart and Atmosphere became anthems of a generation grappling with disillusionment and despair. Wild Cherry. The mastermind behind Wild Cherry was Rob Parisi, a talented vocalist and guitarist who formed the band in 1970. The band's unusual name, inspired by a box of cough drops, hinted at their playful and somewhat quirky approach to music. Initially, Wild Cherry focused on a hard rock sound, but a fateful encounter with a predominantly African-American audience changed their trajectory. During a performance at a predominantly black club, the audience encouraged them to play some funky music, white boys. This request sparked a creative epiphany for Parisi, leading him to write the song that would become their signature hit. Play That Funky Music seamlessly blended elements of funk, rock, and pop, creating a groove that was impossible to resist. The song's infectious energy and catchy lyrics quickly propelled it to the top of the charts, reaching #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B charts. It went platinum, solidifying Wild Cherry's place in music history. The song's success transcended racial boundaries, becoming a unifying anthem that brought people together on dance floors across the country. Despite their initial triumph, Wild Cherry struggled to replicate their success. Subsequent singles failed to chart, and the band eventually disbanded in 1979. Several factors may have contributed to their inability to maintain their momentum, including the pressure to follow up a massive hit and the ever-changing landscape of the music industry. Lynyrd Skynyrd. Their breakthrough came with the release of their debut album in 1973. Tracks like Freebird and Simple Man became instant classics, showcasing their musical prowess and Van Zant's gift for storytelling. Their music resonated with audiences who identified with their working-class ethos, their rebellious spirit, and their celebration of Southern culture. Lynyrd Skynyrd's success continued with a string of hit albums, including Second Helping and Nothin' Fancy. Their most iconic song, Sweet Home Alabama, a response to Neil Young's Southern Man, became an anthem of Southern pride, capturing the complexities and contradictions of the region's history and culture. Just as Lynyrd Skynyrd reached the peak of their creative powers, tragedy struck. On October 20th, 1977, their chartered plane crashed in a Mississippi swamp, killing Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, and several members of their road crew. The crash sent shockwaves through the music world, silencing a band that had become a symbol of Southern rock. Derek and the Dominoes. The genesis of Derek and the Dominoes can be traced back to Clapton's involvement with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, a roots rock band that provided him with a sense of musical community and a respite from the pressures of his burgeoning solo career. Drawn to their relative anonymity and the collaborative spirit of their music making, Clapton found solace and inspiration within their ranks. Out of this fertile ground emerged Derek and the Dominoes, a supergroup featuring Clapton on guitar and vocals, Bobby Whitlock on keyboards and vocals, Carl Radle on bass, and Jim Gordon on drums. Their chemistry was undeniable, and their music, a blend of blues, rock, and soul, possessed a raw energy and emotional depth that captivated audiences. The band's masterpiece, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, released in 1970, showcased their musical prowess and Clapton's searing guitar work. The album's title track, inspired by Clapton's unrequited love for Pattie Boyd, then the wife of his friend George Harrison, became an instant classic, a testament to the power of music to express raw emotion and vulnerability. Despite the critical acclaim and commercial success of Layla, the band's internal dynamics were fragile. Clapton's struggles with heroin addiction and the tragic death of Duane Allman, who had contributed his slide guitar talents to the album, cast a dark shadow over their future. Internal conflicts and creative differences further strained their relationships. Derek and the Dominoes disbanded in 1971, their potential tragically unfulfilled. The band's brief existence, however, left an indelible mark on the musical landscape. Layla remains a cornerstone of rock and roll history, a testament to the band's extraordinary talent and the enduring power of music to transcend personal struggles and tragedy. Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac's journey began in London in 1967, emerging from the British blues scene. Their early sound, driven by the powerful guitar work of Peter Green and the rhythmic foundation of Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, quickly gained them a devoted following. They achieved commercial success with blues-infused hits like Albatross and Oh Well, establishing themselves as a force to be reckoned with in the British rock scene. However, the band's internal dynamics were volatile. Green's struggles with mental health and the pressures of fame led to his departure in 1970, setting off a series of lineup changes that would continue for several years. Various talented musicians, including Bob Welch and Christine McVie, joined and left the band, each contributing to their evolving sound. By the mid-1970s, Fleetwood Mac was in a state of flux, struggling to maintain their identity and commercial momentum. The band relocated to the United States, where a chance encounter with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks would forever alter their trajectory. The addition of these two talented singer-songwriters injected a new energy and creative spark into the band. The classic lineup, Buckingham, Nicks, Fleetwood, John McVie, and Christine McVie, released their self-titled album in 1975, achieving massive commercial success and signaling a new era for Fleetwood Mac. However, the internal drama that had plagued the band's early years was far from over. Rumors, released in 1977, was recorded amidst a backdrop of romantic entanglements and interpersonal conflicts within the band. The album's themes of love, loss, and betrayal resonated with audiences worldwide, becoming one of the best-selling albums of all time. The band's tumultuous personal lives became intertwined with their music, fueling their creativity and captivating the media and fans alike. Which of these bands were you surprised to learn more about? Did any of their stories particularly resonate with you? The Modern Lovers. The Modern Lovers emerged from the fertile ground of Boston's music scene in the early 1970s. Richman, a self-taught musician with a penchant for quirky lyrics and a minimalist approach to songwriting, assembled a band that shared his vision for a stripped-down, direct form of rock and roll. Their sound was influenced by the Velvet Underground's raw energy and the Stooges' proto-punk swagger, but with a distinct lyrical sensibility that set them apart. The Modern Lovers' music was characterized by its simplicity and directness. Richman's lyrics, often delivered in a conversational style, explored a wide range of topics, including dating, growing up, life in the United States, and the mundane aspects of everyday life. Songs like Roadrunner, Pablo Picasso, and Hospital became underground classics, capturing the spirit of youthful rebellion and the alienation of modern life. Despite their growing reputation and a devoted following in the Boston area, the Modern Lovers struggled to find mainstream success. Their unique sound and Richman's unconventional approach to songwriting clashed with the prevailing trends of the music industry. Internal tensions and creative differences also contributed to their instability. In 1974, the Modern Lovers disbanded, leaving behind a collection of recordings that would eventually become their self-titled debut album. The album, released in 1976, several years after the band's demise, achieved critical acclaim and became a cult classic, influencing countless punk and alternative rock bands that followed. Badfinger. Badfinger, a band brimming with talent and potential, was once touted as the successors to the Beatles. Their journey, however, took a devastating turn, leaving fans to ponder a career tragically cut short. Signed in 1968, their infectious melodies and Beatles-esque harmonies quickly earned them comparisons to the Fab Four. Hits like No Matter What and Baby Blue became instant classics, showcasing their songwriting prowess. But behind the catchy tunes and initial success lurked a series of misfortunes. The tragic story of lead singer and songwriter Pete Ham in 1975 cast a dark shadow over the band. His death, fueled by despair over financial and managerial issues, marked the beginning of a heartbreaking downward spiral. Tragically, bandmates Tom Evans and Mike Gibbons also met untimely deaths in the following years, leaving Joey Molland as the sole survivor to carry the band's legacy. Badfinger's music was a potent blend of catchy pop melodies and powerful rock instrumentation, a style that became highly influential in the development of the power pop genre. Mentored by the Beatles themselves, their sound skillfully combined the energy of rock with the accessibility of pop. Albums like No Dice and Straight Up stand as testaments to their songwriting talent and energetic live performances. However, their association with Apple Records, the Beatles' own label, proved to be a double-edged sword. Apple's financial instability led to unfavorable contracts and legal battles for Badfinger, leaving the band feeling exploited and disillusioned. Despite these setbacks, they continued to create powerful music. Their album, Wish You Were Here, released in 1974, demonstrated their continued growth and artistic potential. The Guess Who. Formed in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the early 1960s, the Guess Who initially gained recognition as a cover band. However, their fortunes changed when they adopted a more original sound, incorporating elements of psychedelic rock and incorporating Canadian references into their lyrics. Their breakthrough came with the release of the hit single These Eyes in 1969, which propelled them to international stardom. The Guess Who's success continued with a string of hits, including No Time, Laughing, and Share the Land. Their most iconic song, American Woman, topped the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 1970, becoming an anthem of the era and cementing their place in rock history. The song's anti-establishment lyrics and powerful guitar riffs resonated with a generation questioning societal norms and the Vietnam War. Despite their commercial success, the Guess Who faced internal challenges. Frequent lineup changes, particularly the departure of key members like Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, disrupted the band's creative flow and contributed to internal tensions. The band's sound evolved over time, incorporating elements of jazz and progressive rock, but they struggled to maintain the consistency and momentum of their early years. By the mid-1970s, the Guess Who had lost their footing in the ever-evolving music landscape. Internal conflicts and a decline in commercial success led to their eventual breakup. Though their time in the spotlight was relatively brief, their impact on Canadian music was profound. Budgie. Budgie's sound was a powerful blend, taking the raw energy of hard rock, infusing it with bluesy grit, and even throwing in some progressive elements for good measure. This unique mix showcased their musical talent and songwriting abilities across 7 fantastic albums released throughout the 1970s. Tracks like Bread Fan, which you might know from Metallica's Killer cover, and Crash Course in Brain Surgery, became fan favorites and live show staples, highlighting their raw energy and instrumental skills. At the heart of Budgie's sound was the classic power trio setup. Burke Shelley's distinctive vocals and strong bass lines provided a solid foundation, while Tony Bourge's guitar work, clearly influenced by blues greats like Hendrix and Clapton, added a melodic layer to their heavy sound. And let's not forget Ray Phillips's dynamic drumming, which kept the energy high and drove their performances forward. They even experimented with keyboards from time to time, adding an extra dimension to their musical texture. Budgie's journey continued for several decades, resulting in a total of 10 studio albums. They kept touring and recording until 2010, when Burke Shelley's health issues unfortunately led to the band's disbandment. Though their time in the spotlight wasn't as long or bright as some, Budgie's legacy as unsung heroes of heavy metal is firmly established. Their music continues to be discovered and appreciated by new generations of rock fans, ensuring that their crucial contribution to music history won't be forgotten. They might have flown under the radar for some, but their influence soared high and continues to inspire. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. The Sweet. Formed in London in the mid-1960s as the Sweet Shop, the band's early lineup included the formidable talents of drummer Mick Tucker and vocalist Ian Gillan, who would later achieve fame with Deep Purple. With Brian Connolly replacing Gillan as frontman, the Sweet embarked on a path that would lead them to the forefront of the glam rock movement. Their early hits, like Funny Funny, 1971, and Coco, 1971, were crafted by the songwriting duo of Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman, who specialized in catchy, commercially successful pop tunes. These songs, while undeniably catchy and successful, established the Sweets' image as a bubblegum pop band, an image that they would struggle to shake off despite their musical ambitions. The Sweets' breakthrough came with the release of Blockbuster in 1973. This hard-rocking anthem, with its driving beat and powerful vocals, showcased their musical versatility and hinted at their desire to explore a heavier sound. The song topped the charts in the UK and several other countries, cementing their status as a major force in the glam rock scene. Despite achieving a string of hits throughout the 1970s, including Ballroom Blitz, Fox on the Run, and Teenage Rampage, the Sweets' relationship with their songwriters became increasingly strained. The band members, particularly guitarist Andy Scott, yearned for greater creative control and the opportunity to showcase their songwriting talents. They also grew frustrated with the perception that they were merely a manufactured pop band rather than a group of serious musicians. Internal tensions and a shift in musical trends led to a decline in the Sweets' commercial success in the late 1970s. Brian Connolly's struggles with alcoholism further exacerbated the band's problems. The Sweet ultimately disbanded in 1981, leaving behind a legacy of both triumph and frustration. Which band's story resonated with you the most and why? Television. Television's debut album, Marquee Moon, released in 1977, is widely considered one of the greatest rock albums of all time. Its title track, a sprawling epic clocking in at over 10 minutes, showcased the band's musical prowess and their ability to transcend the limitations of conventional song structures. The album received critical acclaim, but commercial success remained elusive. Despite their artistic achievements, Television was plagued by internal tensions, particularly the clashing personalities of Verlaine and Hell. Hell's departure in 1975, followed by the band's subsequent lineup changes, further destabilized their creative dynamic. Their second album, Adventure, released in 1978, achieved greater success in the UK, but failed to capture the same level of critical acclaim as Marquee Moon. Television ultimately disbanded in 1978, leaving behind a legacy of unfulfilled potential. Their brief reunion in 1992 resulted in a self-titled album, but they never fully regained the creative spark of their early years. Despite their short lifespan, Television's influence on the development of post-punk and alternative rock is undeniable. Bands like Sonic Youth, Pavement, and REM have all cited television as a major influence, recognizing their pioneering role in expanding the sonic and lyrical possibilities of punk rock. The Sex Pistols. Formed in London in 1975, the band's lineup featured Johnny Rotten on vocals, Steve Jones on guitar, Paul Cook on drums, and Glenn Matlock on bass, later replaced by Sid Vicious. Their music, a fusion of 1960s pop influences with the raw aggression of Iggy Pop and the New York Dolls, was a deliberate assault on the prevailing musical trends of the time. Their lyrics, often laced with profanity and social commentary, challenged societal norms and expressed the anger and disillusionment of a generation facing economic hardship and social unrest. The Sex Pistols' breakthrough came with the release of their single Anarchy in the UK in 1976. The song's confrontational lyrics and raw energy became a rallying cry for the burgeoning punk movement, capturing the spirit of rebellion and anti-authoritarianism that defined the era. Their notoriety reached new heights when they appeared on a live television program and unleashed a torrent of profanity, shocking the nation and solidifying their status as public enemy number one. The incident led to their being dropped by their record label, EMI, but it also fueled their rebellious image and attracted a growing legion of fans. The Sex Pistols' only studio album, Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, released in 1977, became a landmark achievement in punk rock. Its raw energy, confrontational lyrics, and iconic cover art cemented their place in music history. However, the band's internal dynamics were volatile, fueled by drug use, personality clashes, and the pressures of fame. A disastrous U.S. tour in 1978 exposed the cracks in their foundation, leading to their eventual implosion. The Runaways. Formed in Los Angeles, the band, spearheaded by the dynamic duo of Joan Jett and Lita Ford, quickly gained notoriety for their raw energy and defiant attitude. Anthems like Cherry Bomb became rallying cries for a generation eager to break free from societal constraints. Their music, a fusion of hard rock, punk, and glam, resonated with fans who craved something different, something louder, and unapologetically rebellious. The Runaways' legacy, though relatively brief, is undeniable. They released 4 studio albums and a live album, each showcasing their evolving sound and growing confidence. Songs like Cherry Bomb, Hollywood, and Queens of Noise became cult classics, cementing their place in rock history. Their influence extended far beyond the United States, with Japan, in particular, embracing them as superstars. However, behind the facade of success, tensions simmered within the band. Creative differences, fueled by the diverging musical tastes of Jett and Ford, began to unravel their unity. Jett gravitated towards a punk and glam rock aesthetic, while Ford's passion lay in hard rock and heavy metal. These stylistic clashes, coupled with the pressures of fame and the volatile dynamics of a young band navigating the music industry, proved too difficult to overcome. The Runaways' final concert, a bittersweet New Year's Eve performance in 1978, marked the end of an era. Though their time together was short-lived, their impact was profound. The Runaways proved that women could not only rock as hard as men, but could also command the stage with equal power and ferocity. King Crimson. King Crimson, a band synonymous with musical innovation and boundary-pushing experimentation, left an indelible mark on the progressive rock landscape. Their groundbreaking sound, a fusion of jazz, classical, and experimental elements, set them apart from their contemporaries, influencing generations of musicians. However, their journey was also characterized by internal conflicts and shifting lineups, ultimately leading to their disbandment in 1974. Their debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King, released in 1969, remains a landmark achievement in progressive rock. Its iconic cover art, depicting a screaming face, reflected the album's unsettling and intense sonic landscape. Tracks like 21st Century Schizoid Man and Epitaph showcased the band's virtuosity and willingness to challenge conventional musical structures, blending complex time signatures, intricate instrumental passages, and haunting lyrics. The album's impact was immediate, establishing King Crimson as a force to be reckoned with in the burgeoning progressive rock scene. However, the band's creative intensity also proved to be a source of internal friction. Following the departure of key members Ian MacDonald and Michael Giles, and later Greg Lake, King Crimson entered a period of instability. Founder and guitarist Robert Fripp, the band's driving force, remained committed to pushing musical boundaries, leading to a revolving door of musicians and a constant evolution of their sound. Each iteration of King Crimson explored new sonic territories, incorporating elements of hard rock, jazz fusion, and avant-garde music. This constant state of flux, while creatively stimulating, also contributed to internal tensions. The demanding nature of Fripp's musical vision and the frequent lineup changes created a challenging environment for band members. By 1974, the internal pressures had reached a breaking point, leading to King Crimson's disbandment. Big Star. Formed in Memphis, Tennessee in the early 1970s, Big Star's music was characterized by a blend of catchy melodies, jangly guitars, and introspective lyrics. Chilton's songwriting, often drawing on themes of love, loss, and disillusionment, resonated with a generation coming of age in a time of societal upheaval. Their debut album, Number 1 Record, released in 1972, showcased their signature sound, with tracks like In the Street and 13 becoming instant classics among discerning music fans. Despite the positive critical reception, Big Star struggled with distribution issues and a lack of promotional support, hindering their ability to reach a wider audience. Their second album, Radio City, released in 1974, further solidified their reputation as a band of exceptional talent. But commercial success remained elusive. Internal tensions and frustration over their lack of recognition ultimately led to the band's disbandment in the mid-1970s. Ironically, Big Star's influence grew exponentially in the years following their breakup. Bands like The Replacements, R.E.M., and Teenage Fan Club have all cited Big Star as a major inspiration, acknowledging their pioneering role in shaping the power pop genre. Their music began to gain a cult following, with September Girls and 13 becoming staples of college radio playlists. The Carpenters. Richard and Karen Carpenter's musical journey began in their hometown of Downey, California. Their shared passion for music led them to form the Richard Carpenter Trio, a jazz-influenced ensemble that showcased Richard's piano skills and Karen's budding talent as a drummer and vocalist. They honed their craft, winning a Battle of the Bands competition in 1966, foreshadowing the success that lay ahead. In 1969, they released their first album, Offering, under the name Carpenters. While the album failed to gain commercial traction, it demonstrated their potential for crafting sophisticated arrangements and showcasing Karen's distinctive contralto vocals. Their second album, Close to You, released in 1970, proved to be their breakthrough moment. The singles Close to You and They Long to Be Close to You became instant classics, topping the charts and earning them 2 Grammy Awards. Tragically, behind the facade of success, Karen Carpenter was battling a debilitating eating disorder. Anorexia nervosa, a condition that was not well understood at the time, took a devastating toll on her physical and mental health. Despite her struggles, she continued to perform and record, her voice retaining its power and beauty. However, the illness ultimately proved insurmountable. Karen Carpenter passed away in 1983 at the young age of 32, leaving behind a legacy of music that continues to touch hearts and inspire generations of musicians. Her death brought increased awareness to the dangers of eating disorders, sparking conversations about body image and mental health. Montrose. The original Montrose lineup featured a formidable quartet of musicians: Sammy Hagar on vocals, Ronnie Montrose on guitar, Bill Church on bass, and Denny Carmassi on drums. Their self-titled debut album, released in 1973, showcased their raw energy and hard-hitting sound. Tracks like Rock Candy and Bad Motor Scooter became instant classics, establishing Montrose as a force to be reckoned with in the burgeoning hard rock scene. The album's success earned them a devoted following and critical acclaim, but internal tensions began to surface. Hagar's growing desire for creative control clashed with Montrose's vision for the band, leading to Hagar's departure after their second album, Paper Money, was released in 1974. Despite Hagar's departure, Montrose continued to forge ahead, releasing 2 more studio albums with various vocalists. However, they struggled to replicate the success of their early years. Changes in musical trends, coupled with the band's inability to find a consistent frontman who could match Hagar's charisma and vocal power, contributed to their decline. Montrose ultimately disbanded in 1977, leaving behind a legacy of what might have been. The brainchild of English musician Robin Scott, stands as a fascinating example of a band whose legacy rests primarily on a single, yet incredibly impactful song. Their 1979 hit, Pop Music, captured the zeitgeist of the late 1970s, ushering in a new wave of synth-pop music with its infectious blend of electronic sounds, catchy melodies, and a spoken-word chorus that became an instant earworm. Despite the song's massive success, M's fame proved to be fleeting, a testament to the fickle nature of the music industry and the challenges of sustaining momentum in a rapidly evolving musical landscape. Pop music emerged at a pivotal moment in music history, as punk rock's energy was giving way to a new wave of electronic experimentation. The song's minimalist arrangement, featuring a pulsating synth bass line, robotic vocals, and a spoken-word chorus that name-checked various musical genres, felt both futuristic and undeniably catchy. Its lyrics, which touched on themes of fame, consumerism, and the changing face of popular culture, resonated with a generation coming of age in a rapidly changing world. The song's impact was immediate. Pop music topped the charts in several countries, including the UK, the US, and Australia, becoming a global phenomenon. It introduced a new sound to mainstream audiences, paving the way for the synth-pop explosion of the 1980s. Bands like Depeche Mode, The Human League, and Duran Duran would all cite M as an influence, acknowledging their pioneering role in shaping the sound of electronic pop music. Sha Na Na. Their breakthrough came with a surprise invitation to perform at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. Their high-energy set, complete with gold lame jackets, pompadours, and synchronized dance moves, captivated the massive audience and exposed them to a wider audience. The Woodstock performance catapulted Sha Na Na to national prominence, paving the way for a successful recording career and a foray into the world of television and film. Sha Na Na's appearance in the 1978 film Grease, as the band Johnny Casino and the Gamblers, further solidified their place in pop culture. Their performance of Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay and other classic rock and roll anthems became an integral part of the film's enduring appeal. Capitalizing on their newfound fame, Sha Na Na launched their own self-titled television series in 1977. The show, which featured musical performances and comedic sketches, ran for 4 seasons, introducing a new generation to the sounds of doo-wop and showcasing the band's versatility as entertainers. Despite their success in television and film, Sha Na Na continued to tour and record, releasing numerous albums throughout the 1970s and beyond. Their music, while rooted in the nostalgia of the 1950s, also incorporated elements of rock and roll and pop, demonstrating their ability to adapt and evolve while staying true to their doo-wop roots. The Jam. Their debut album, In the City, released in 1977, captured the raw energy of punk rock, with Weller's lyrics reflecting the social and economic anxieties of working-class youth. The band's sound drew comparisons to The Who, particularly in their energetic stage presence, and Weller's mod-inspired fashion sense. The Jam's subsequent albums, including This Is the Modern World and All Mod Cons, showcased their musical growth and Weller's expanding lyrical palette. Their music incorporated influences from a diverse range of sources, including the Kinks, the Beatles, Motown, and soul, demonstrating their ability to transcend the limitations of the punk genre. Despite achieving massive success in the UK with 4 consecutive #1 albums, the Jam never quite replicated that level of popularity internationally. Weller, however, remained steadfast in his artistic vision, refusing to compromise his creative integrity for commercial gain. In 1982, at the peak of their powers, Weller announced the Jam's disbandment, shocking fans and critics alike. He felt that the band had reached its creative peak and that he needed to explore new musical directions. Weller went on to form the Style Council, a band that embraced a more sophisticated, soul-infused sound, and later embarked on a successful solo career. From the soulful ballads to the hard-driving funk, these 70s black bands left an undeniable mark. Their music continues to resonate, even though many of their stories faded from the spotlight. We've only scratched the surface, so let us know in the comments, who do we miss? If you dug this musical journey, check out the other videos in this series. Don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and as always, thanks for tuning in.